Spider-Man the Animated Series is by far one of my favorite shows from my childhood. One I always visited in my youth as a form of comfort. I guess in that respect, not much has changed, but this show was part of a large lineup for me of superhero animated works that I digested as a child and would go on to have lasting effects on me leading into my adult life. For today's video, we're going to be covering Season 1, Episode 1, Night of the Lizard. For all my veteran viewers, this was the very first upload on the channel 6 years ago, and saying that out loud is making me realize how fast time flies in the most unfortunate of ways possible. I'd like to believe 6 years of me doing this would hopefully result in my becoming a bit of a better writer. I didn't rewatch the original upload to prepare for this or anything. I wanted this to be as organic as possible. With all that out of the way, hello everyone, my name is Sen, and welcome to Crash Block. Spider-Man the Animated Series kicks things off somewhere with his career already being established. The first episode isn't an origin story, and it's very possible it could have benefited from being one, with the new series potentially drawing in a new audience. The show, as it progresses through the seasons, gives subtle bits of what led Spider-Man on the path to becoming a hero in the first place. From what I'm aware, the last show to come out before this one was Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, releasing from 1981 to 1983. The full 10-year gap between Amazing Friends and the animated series makes me think it would have been fine to have an origin story, but things as they are now are more than okay by me. Moving things along, we kick things off with Spider-Man doing as he does and swinging through the bustling New York City, but this is more so to give us an establishing shot of the wall crawler so we know that this show's about Spider-Man. The real thing to focus on for the moment is what's taking place underground, with some electrical workers doing some type of maintenance. I'm not really sure what the reason for the work is.
TV? Really? Hey, my old TV gets these double images, you know what I mean? Hey, maybe you could,
No, I was a TV executive.
Oh, you're better off down here.
But all this is to do is to set up our villain of the week.
Holy!
Spider-Man the Animated Series, as well as a lot of animated superhero works, would focus on making self-contained stories that would take place in one episode, in what is referred to as a 22-minute format. It's pretty rare that shows like this would step outside of that formula by creating multi-part stories to follow along with. That way you could hop in on any episode and follow along. This format is both impressive to see well fleshed out stories in a single episode, but can also be looked at as a detriment to the pacing of these same episodes at the very same time, oftentimes causing endings or narrative beats to feel rushed. This isn't always the case. I mean, Heart of Ice is one of my favorite pieces of animated hero work, but the stories that can break into multi-part territory feel that much greater as a result. Sorry, nerding out for a second. It's kind of what I do. Like I was saying, we get a shot of I'd be really worried if you didn't already guess as a result of the title, but we get to see the lizard front and center, and I love this image of him. These workers very reasonably get the fuck out of there in a panic, as any sane person would be, but throwing levels of caution to the wind as a result of that, generic worker 1 somehow gets captured through the grate next to where they were working and dragged back down to the sewers, which if you're generic worker 2 would be horrifying.
Red eyes. The red eyes after me.
Uh-huh. And did they belong to little pink elephants?
No, mister, it was real. It was real, I swear.
This event makes Worker 2's pants one crap ton heavier, completely sending any kind of caution to the wind and peeling out of there. This makes good on the previous segment of Spider-Man patrolling the streets, which until now feels a little weird to me. Like, when I think of Spider-Man patrolling NYC, I always think of him doing so at night. It just feels a little odd seeing him in broad daylight like this, like maybe he didn't have class or work. No problem with this, it's just strange. Generic Worker 2 drives off into the plane of three-dimensional existence, which for a lot of people I know is a gripe in the visuals of the show. I mean, these renders age like milk for sure, but even though it looks bad to me, it still finds a way to charm me, largely because of my bias with the show. It was definitely around this time that shows tried to blend in 3D renders into the space of 2D animation to be more cost effective, and is still something seen to this very day. I think of anime in the modern era, but it's probably because I digest more anime than American-made cartoons in my old age. Anyway, Spider-Man is looking to get the reckless driver that will now low-key suffer from some kind of PTSD to literally pump the brakes, resulting in the worker's van driving off the bridge right into one of the most iconic intros of my childhood. Which, if you didn't know, the intro of this show was performed by Joe Perry, the lead guitarist for fucking Aerosmith. That's still crazy to think about how that all transpired in the first place. Like, I really wonder wonder what that boardroom meeting actually looked like. I love this intro. It does a good job at some of the antics, the supporting cast that surround Peter, and some of the foes that Spider-Man will eventually have to tackle in the future. Not much to say, I'm a fan. As we make our way out of the intro, we fade back into Spider-Man making a narrow escape with a civilian while the work van he was driving crashes and sinks into the river below. Now, I've made it far enough into the video without mentioning the actor playing Spider-Man in the show, which is one Christopher Daniel Barnes. There have been many voice actors for Spider-Man over the years, but largely because it's what I grew up with, when I think of the voice of Spider-Man, it usually ends up being this one. This performance had to have made some kind of lasting impression because he's returned to things revolving around the character for at least a handful of times. Things like Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, voicing Miguel O'Hara as Spider-Man 2099. The scene in question wraps up with Spider-Man trying to suss out what the cause of the commotion was, but not lingering for much longer than that. It's hard for me to believe that Spider-Man wouldn't stick around any longer than dropping the citizen to safety and trying to get straight answers out of him. And in this scene, he's ever the skeptic of what the man in fear was talking about. It really makes you wonder what Spider-Man was facing up to this point, likely just being street-level crimes that happen in day-to-day life, because whenever we get a villain at any point in the future of the show, out of my memory, it's Spider-Man or Peter's first time encountering them, which would lead me to believe we're still relatively early in Spider-Man's career as a whole. Transitioning over to the Daily Bugle with Peter interacting with a reoccurring character that does become a partial plot point in probably a couple of episodes throughout the show is Robbie Robertson, voiced by Rodney Salisbury. Robbie oftentimes serves as the level-headed buffer between the high-strung antagonistic nature of J. Jonah Jameson and Peter. Robbie always has a really warm, fatherly energy to him, and I love that about the character. Anyways, Robbie is shuffling through some of Peter's pictures of Spider-Man as he's looking to task Peter with getting the scoop on the Lizard, and I'm really not sure if I'm crazy or not, but the show already feels like it's moving a mile a minute. And right off the back of introducing Robbie, we get introduced to Jonah and Eddie Brock. Doing so isn't criminal or anything, this is just likely the flow of Peter's day-to-day routine and isn't trying to hold our hand because, well, I mean, 22-minute format and all. The main thing going on in this scene is to give exposition. Spoilers, the other half of the Lizard's Dr. Jekyll situation, and doing so in a way that feels pretty natural. Brock actually starts out with a breadcrumb and Peter is sent to follow up on it because he already has a connection with Dr. Kurt Connors.
Right, closest one's at Empire State. Name's Connors.
Dr. Kurt Connors?
You know him, Peter?
He's one of my teachers, Mr. Robertson. He's an expert in recombinant DNA and reptile mutagenics. He's also a genius.
Yeah, whatever. You'll be the contact with Connors from now on, kid.
But boss,
The kid already knows him.
Now, the people around Peter being inquisitive of his knowledge of Dr. Connors informs the exposition of his character. It's extremely decent and smooth writing to put Peter on the trail. I like it a lot. Good stuff. The scene also does a job to add some tension between Brock and Peter because it started out as Brock's lead that gets things moving along, but Peter inadvertently snubs him due to his connection and understanding of Connor's work in a way that Eddie just doesn't have. This all makes sense to send Peter, but it would be understandable if Eddie Brock were to be frustrated at this. While Peter is still skeptical of all this, he is incentivized to pursue the lead because the first person to get a photo of the fabled lizard gets a nice
The first one to get a photo of the lizard for my nightly news gets a $1,000 bonus.
Color or black and white?
lightning strikes to set the scene as night falls upon the audience as we transition to the rain-soaked New York City. And we catch a bit of Peter's home life with, to nobody's surprise, his Aunt May Parker. Peter's aunt, much like in any iterations, is struggling to make ends meet with some of her overdue bills. This is to further incentivize Peter to go after any kind of a lead to the lizard. I really love this moment with Peter and how his motivations initially start out focusing on doing something for himself by potentially getting a motorcycle, but how quickly he chooses to take care of those around him in their time of need.
Look at these bills. And here I am thinking of things to buy for myself. She's been like a mother to me for years. It's time I paid her back. And if I can't,
It's a $1,000 bonus.
Spider-Man will.
Peter is a morally good dude, which is a big part of the reason he becomes Spider-Man. If this, and I do mean brief, moment is meant to push the idea that Peter's being a little selfish, we didn't get enough time to linger on that idea. Another piece of Spider-Man work I'm sure a lot of us love, that being Spectacular Spider-Man, executes this idea a little better. Assuming this was at least the intention in the first place, in Spectacular Spider-Man, Peter's very similarly focused on taking a picture of the Lizard to get a little extra money, and with that money he wants and is told to invest in a new camera. In Spectacular, we get a little more time with Peter wanting to do something for himself, versus in the 90s show, Peter very immediately switches up to helping hold things down with Aunt May. If you guys want to hear me chat about Spectacular Spider-Man, let me know. But let's keep on moving. Spider-Man is on the job hunting for the Lizard at the last known location of the missing subway worker, and while Spidey's on the hunt, he does what he does best, talking to himself along the way, when we get one of the worst, best jokes of all time.
Yeah, anyway, this lizard thing is probably just an urban myth. Wait a minute, looks like I was myth-taken.
Now that we have a bit of a lead with some sort of evidence that this could all be legit, Peter's now on his way to consult a good doctor on his findings, running into another reoccurring supporting character, Deborah Whitman. Deborah is another point of connection to people revolving around Dr. Connors. I really enjoy a lot of the banter that these two characters have between each other. Funnily enough though, I really used to dislike when Deborah was on screen when I was a kid, but now I'm really fond of her as a supporting character. Let me know who you think is the best girl in the show. I personally am a fan of Black-Cat because of reasons. Other than the fact that she's every man's wet dream, I do think she's one of the characters for Spider-Man that cares for him in this very tender way, down to just when she speaks to him. Back to where we were, we get a bit more fleshing out of the characteristics of the Lizard. Deborah identifies that with the indication of the prints that Peter took a photo of, that the prints of the Lizard are of the Squamata family. Squamata is just a generalization of large-scaled lizards. But the trait that Deborah points out that means a crumb of something is, with the impressions being as deep as they are, it's just a very large lizard, indicating that the lizard walks on two legs. Apparently there's multiple lizard breeds that primarily will run on two legs as a way of gaining speed and use this in forms of defense to escape threats. I don't know what gave me the idea I wouldn't really be learning anything about lizards, but here we are. The real purpose of this scene is to set up a horror element to the show, because it's the Lizard, and the Lizard should be portrayed in as frightening a manner as possible, really treating this character like he's part of a horror movie. Big fan of this, and I've been saying they should do something similar with certain Batman villains, and now we're getting the Clayface movie. Eddie Brock shown in the background of this scene, but who cares? With Peter and Deborah entering Dr. Connors' office and maybe lab, this really just feels like his office, so I don't know why the thing that we'll talk about later is here, but this scene is to sow a sort of false narrative that Dr. Connors is being kidnapped by the Lizard. It makes me wonder if I believed this when I was a dumb kid, but I truly can't remember. It's been so long since I first watched this episode, and it's possible I knew about Dr. Connors' affliction beforehand because I've always been around superhero media for as long as I can remember. My focus for the longest time is, as the Lizard is fleeing the scene in question, Peter's ready to jump after him, going full superhero mode. But what in the fuck would he have said to Deborah afterwards? Was he just going to let his secret out of the bag and bring her in on it? I mean, personally, I would have. You just thought you saw your professor getting kidnapped. However, Peter chooses not to pursue, and we get the full background of how the Lizard came to be. Dr. Connors is experimenting with lizard DNA in mammal creatures, trying to carry over reptiles' abilities to regrow limbs in other life forms, with the help of the item in question that I was mentioning earlier, that being the Neogenic Recombinator, which at least comes back a handful of times out of what I remember through the show. Connors is doing his research to help all of mankind. There's a bit of self-serving going on because Connors is missing an arm of his own. Don't take that as this work being any kind of morally ambiguous, because he does benefit from it. Two things can be true at the same time. He wants to gain back what is lost to him, as well as help anyone else who has suffered a similar fate.
Why would anybody want to kidnap Doc Connors?
This, ironically, is the funniest line in the episode to me. Like, Peter, you just thought of one of the, I'm sure, many reasons why someone would want to kidnap the good doctor. Just because someone is doing something good doesn't mean what they're doing can't be repurposed for ill-gotten gains. The thing I like so much about the Lizard / Dr. Connors is that this character is not just treated as some type of generic monster. Set up for this character, especially around points of exposition, will treat him this way for sure. But the Lizard is also viewed through the eye of sympathy. Connors has a family he cares greatly about, and it's not like he turned himself this way on purpose like some generic villain. It was all just a freak accident that went horribly wrong in the pursuit of helping himself and other people. I really like that we get to see him peering in on his family with a sense of reluctance. It starts out as a fake out with Spider-Man being the one to surprise them, and you'd think this would come as some form of surprise to her, but the Connors family is fully aware of Kurt's affliction. Smack dab between all of this is a small action scene between Spider-Man and the Lizard. I mean, it is a superhero show. There's always going to be some kind of action thrown into the larger storytelling of these episodes. The spots of combat were always cool little moments. This moment serves to show that Spider-Man in this case is outmatched. It's fairly fitting after all, spiders are naturally prey for lizards, and I like when things like this follow a similar relationship. Now, with this little crumb of action is a good time to bring up something that's pretty important with how strict the censorship guidelines were regarding shows animated around this time. A lot of this came from the side of cartoons that were developed by Fox Kids, so if you were ever wondering why they never threw a punch or had traditional guns in shows like this, it was due to the very strict censorship guidelines at the time. Honestly, I never really picked up on the fact that they never threw a punch in this show, but in a way, you'll often get your most creative through certain types of restrictions. Amidst Spider-Man's initial confrontation with the Lizard, Peter of course drops his camera in a puddle, losing his photo, likely ruining the film inside. This problem isn't entirely solved in the modern generation. If you're lucky, you could probably salvage the SD card inside, unless the camera would be fully submerged. Anyways, I'm getting hung up on dumb things. Spider-Man is treated as a rag doll in this scene, and before the Lizard pounces to finish things off, there is still some level of restraint within him. His son Billy gets through to him, and the Lizard scampers off. Martha, Kurt's wife, lets Spider-Man in on the full scope of things, explaining that Kurt is the Lizard. I couldn't imagine how horrifying that must have been for all of them, but Eddie Brock is there to overhear things. We only have about 8 minutes left in the episode, so things really have to get moving from here on. Spider-Man apprehends Brock, and right after Peter's spider sense is triggered. I always really loved this effect, but I always wanted to try to read in on this effect and see if it actually meant anything with the visual information that goes on in the background. I couldn't make anything out, but if you guys know anything about the design of Peter's spider sense, please let me know. It would be really cool to read about. Moving on, Spider-Man is alerted by the screams of Martha, and Billy points Spider-Man in the direction of the sewers. The Lizard kidnapped Martha to have her work on the neogenic recombinator because her fingers are more nimble. With Spider-Man pursuing, we get a nice little mentioning of the wider Marvel universe.
Never have I seen the Avengers in a sewer, or the Defenders. Well, maybe the Hulk.
Crossovers, while not entirely unheard of, were still not as commonplace, and we actually do get some cool crossovers in this show with multiple different heroes, which was always really cool. As Spider-Man's navigating the sewers, he does more of what Spider-Man does, and that's talking to himself, which is very natural for the character and anyone who knows him, but also enlightens the audience on whatever is on Peter or Spider-Man's mind. I don't think there's too many heroes that fit this idea as well as Spider-Man does. I couldn't imagine a world where Superman or Batman would talk to themselves in this way. Terry McGinnis' Batman, sure, but it just so perfectly fits a hero like Spider-Man. Peter, in these moments before his confrontation, is afraid and conflicted at the same time. Being a hero does not make you invincible. And just as Spider-Man is afraid of his own safety, he's afraid to potentially hurt his friend. But at the end of the day, he knows the Lizard needs to be stopped. We don't need a ton to show that Spider-Man or Peter's afraid. I mean, any reasonable person would be, but I think this show shows off the idea of fear or paranoia much more effectively when Venom comes into the fold. But it's able to do that because the episodes are strung up into multiple parts, conveying fear a little bit more. I'll very much be looking forward to when we eventually get there. It's really just driving home that they're trying to do a lot with only such limited time. A couple of things to draw attention to is Peter bringing up his web cartridges. This was an element of the show to add levels of tension. It's only brought up that Spider-Man's web fluid is running low, which would cause it to be less dense, but it will always be brought up to inconvenience Spider-Man. I do remember bringing up the fact that Spider-Man does find the missing subway worker, but it's never mentioned if the worker ever makes it out, and Peter never is shown to go back for him. So presumably, he's dead. We follow the now dead in my head canonically subway worker, with the Lizard talking to...
What are you going to do with that?
Don't be afraid, Margaret.
Wait, Margaret? Yeah, I looked up her name earlier and came up with Martha because I wasn't sure if they mentioned it, but I guess in the show it's Margaret. I could have just edited this out of the script, but I felt like leaving it in. The scene where the lizard is divulging his plans to Margaret is interesting to me because on some level Kurt is still in there, but it's like a half and half method. The scientific mind of Dr. Connors is preserved, but it's more tied to the ambitions of the lizard. But when the lizard speaks to Margaret, there's still a tenderness and sense of loving in his voice. The goal of the lizard is to turn the world into creatures like him. It's taking the original idea of Connors and perverting that. The goal is still the same, to make sure that people don't get hurt and can heal, avoid sickness, all that, but in the lizard's mind, the best way to do that is for everyone to become like him.
After you transform everyone, we'll all be like you.
Of course. I'm the first of a new race, a better race.
If you're so much better, why do you need my hands to help you? You're not better.
This scene hurts me because Margartha is actually appealing to the lizard. It really seems like she's getting through to him and using their son as emotional leverage. We're not going to talk about what happens in the comics, and when it really feels like Margartha is breaking through to him, Spider-Man intervenes because we need more action. This, at the end of the day, is a really good sequence. I really do think this show shows off the agility and strength of not just Spider-Man, but his foes too, and Margaret gets obliterated. If the velocity of his tail is anything similar to what he just did to the concrete wall the lizard destroyed earlier, we can add Dr. Connors' wife to the kill count too. In the final moments between the lizard and Spider-Man, we're plunged into the water, giving us another window into Spider-Man's mind.
Strange. So strange. A week ago, this creature was a scientist. My teacher. My friend. He cared for people and wanted to help them just as I do. And now look at the both of us. Fighting each other, fighting for our lives.
Spider-Man makes it to the neogenic recombinator and sets it off, which there's no way this thing would still work after being totally submerged in water, but the device works all the same, reverting the lizard into Dr. Connors. Spider-Man was right next to the neogenic recombinator as well. I wonder if that'll come up later. Spider-Man scoops up his camera and gets everyone except the subway worker and gets the fuck out of there. Wrapping things up at the Connors residence with Eddie, Brock, and Mr. Jameson pulling up because Brock ran his mouth about what he witnessed in the hopes of getting the front page. I just don't know why Eddie would be thinking that Dr. Connors as the lizard would be with his wife and child at home in his lizard state. Like, did he just expect a 6-foot-tall lizard to casually answer the door holding his child next to his wife? That brings a very comical image to my mind. If someone is capable of drawing this, please do and send it to me. That would be hilarious.
You want it cooked or raw?
Things don't just wrap up cleanly on the side of the Connors, but the Parkers as well. Peter gets his $1,000 bonus and is able to help out his aunt with the bills. I just think it's funny that Aunt May was more worried about Spider-Man being the horrible one and what would have happened to Peter if he got caught, not by the lizard, but by Spider-Man. We get a nice line to finish things off, shining the light of the day, ending the night of the lizard.
And what if that horrible Spider-Man had caught you?
Aunt May. She'd never understand. Spider-Man's already caught me in his web. And for better or worse, he and I are stuck together. Forever.
This by no means is one of my favorite episodes, but it's still very good, and think it's beyond impressive that they told the story that they did and how the show, to me, still looks as good as it does, and it's just the first episode. My only real complaint is the time constraints these episodes have to tell their story in. I mean, this episode was just flying from scene to scene, not giving us any real time to linger on one thing or another. Once again, this is not the fault of the show, but how shows like this had to be made. I think this is a fantastic one-stop shop for anyone that just wants a taste of Spider-Man, and you can really just pick up any episode of the show and have a nice little adventure. I really appreciate how the lizard was shot like he was the antagonist of a horror movie, being silhouetted by the shadows around him, emphasizing his glowing eyes. This is really similar to how I like to see characters like Mr. Freeze being shot. Even though the moments of action are placed to be just that, I still thought they were quite good and well animated. But in those moments, we get that window into Spider-Man's mind to let us know what he's thinking and or feeling. And in this case, it was fear, but also sympathy towards his friend and teacher. And I very much appreciated that the lizard wasn't just treated as a monster, but a character to be sympathetic towards. That there was moments of compassion from the lizard, and he's not entirely feral. This monster, this character, has motivations of their own that coincide with Connor's, because they share the same brain, but they have different ends to accomplish the end game. Connors wants to heal any or everyone, and the lizard wants to prevent anyone from getting hurt by becoming like him. The day is saved, the one subway worker dies, and we wrap up on a nice note. I really like this episode, and if you guys want me to do more, I would be more than happy to do so. The next episodes in the lineup of the first season are episode 2 and 3, which are about the Spider Slayers. I remember these episodes fairly well and don't recall them being as good as something like this, but I'm sure they're enjoyable all the same. Until then, thank you all so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed my dive into something nostalgic for me, let me know. If you did enjoy the video, by all means drop a like, or if I missed anything you thought was crucial, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, just remember to keep on fighting and get ready for the next battle. I'll see you guys later. Peace.